and welcome to Comp News Network's Comp Talk. We are all aware of the tragic outcome of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon. But what is now coming to light are the problems and failures of a workers' comp system overwhelmed by such a catastrophic event. Our guest today, Peter Rumanier, has studied this phenomenon extensively and is emerging as a leading expert on the issue. Mr. Rumanier has been active in the workers' compensation community for over 20 years. He has worked for or consulted to national and regional insurers, large and small employers, medical providers, and technology firms. Peter is the most prolific writer in America on workers' compensation issues and writes the workers' compensation column for Risk and Insurance magazine. He holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. And what that really means is you are the smartest person in this conversation, I can assure you. He lives in Woodstock, Vermont. His personal website is www.peterrumanier.com. We will put that on the screen so that you can see how that is. Peter, welcome to the program today.
Thank you very much, Bob.
Appreciate you joining us. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, we're talking about the aftermath of the World Trade Center, the attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon. You've written several articles that appeared in Risk and Insurance, a series that appeared in Risk and Insurance magazine. What were the worker safety errors during the attempt to remove people from the buildings? That seems to be a primary issue.
Right.
What were some of those errors?
Right, Bob. We're talking about here the time between the building collapsed and the next few days and weeks and months of not simply trying to recover bodies, but also just removing the debris. And there was a period of time when there was controlled chaos, and anyone could expect that given the horrific nature of it, the situation, and the genuine expectation that there were survivors underneath the rubble. But after about 3 days, things should have settled down. And the people have pointed out, a number of people have pointed out, the failure of the workers to properly use personal protective equipment. But that, to some extent, is a symptom of a more serious problem, which was that the site was not controlled by an entity which really understood work safety, didn't really understand hazards. That was a unit of the city of New York. Okay, all right. So what happened with work safety at Ground Zero? How many were made ill, and how severely are we talking about? Well, that's a big open question right now. There were about 2,000 workers a day on a 24-hour basis at Ground Zero for, let's say, the first month or two. There is an estimate, you can compile estimates from various sources, which suggest about 10,000 workers have some kind of persistent problem, either a respiratory problem or a mental issue, mental health issue. How have these workers been tracked? I mean, you're citing some. I use the word impressive. I'm a little reluctant to say impressive, but it is a staggering. Right. How have these workers been tracked? Well, that's really, I'm going to use rather provocatively the term scandalous, because they were not medically monitored on a careful basis, except for the firefighters for the city of New York, which means that at this time in the fall of 2007, that figure of people who have serious ongoing problems may be as low as a couple of thousand, or maybe 15 to 20,000. We don't know. Okay, and we don't know what people contributed from their prior experience, or their smoking habits, or their health habits, what they contributed to their condition. What environmental concerns prior to that. That's right. Interesting. Now, how is the workers' compensation system, and you've just kind of answered that question, you kind of segued into my next question, how's the workers' compensation and other support systems perform for these disabled workers? Bob, we have a workers' comp system which works well on a very straightforward model. There's a worker who is injured with a clear injury. He or she reports it to one employer. The employer reports it to the insurer. The employer and the insurer do their level best to help the worker recover and pay them benefits, and as well as make sure that everything is nip and tuck. Well, what we have here is diseases, and we have many employers. There are over 100 employers working at Ground Zero, and we have some state laws that frustrate the claimant who is presenting with a disease claim. So the system really ground to a halt. And in fact, the state legislature back in 2006, which means 5 years after 9/11, had to change the law to make sure that people could file valid claims.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting you say that because obviously there may be some statutory relief or legislative relief. What are some of the other solutions because God forbid this happens again, another catastrophic event. Do you see any solutions on the horizon? What would you, in a perfect world, what would Peter Rumanier recommend?
Well, good question. I have really 3 recommendations which are easier to suggest and to implement.
Okay.
The first one is that whenever there's a disaster, a local disaster reaching a certain threshold, which I'm going to be cute and not tell you what the threshold is because I don't know what it is.
Oh, okay. I just thought you were holding something back from it.
No.
Okay.
that if it hits a certain threshold, that the federal government immediately become responsible, have the authority of what's called site command. Now, it could delegate it back immediately to the local or state government.
Right.
But what happened here was that the site command was in a local entity which was way over its head. The second thing has to do with this nasty, nasty problem of medical monitoring. Who is going to take hold of the potentially dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of workers who are exposed to disease, and who is going to pay for their careful monitoring, and who's going to organize it? We don't know quite who that will be. Unfortunately, state governments don't work and insurers don't work. So it may have to be the federal government, which is not very good news.
Well, yeah, especially particularly in light of the Katrina
absolutely.
And how the federal government, and I'm not piling on the federal government because I think there are failures at local and state levels there as well. But it is. That's interesting. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's
okay. Now the third recommendation also, for better or for worse, deals with the federal government because state laws, not simply in New York, but in many other states, most other states, really are designed expressly to frustrate disease claims. The people don't make any bones about it.
Right.
The leading workers' comp researcher in the country, John Burton of Rutgers University, has laid this out in exquisite and depressing detail. So if the states cannot reform their handling of disease claims coming out of disasters, I'd make the sweeping judgment that the entire workers' comp system for these covered workers, these exposed workers, be transferred over to the Federal Department of Labor.
Really? That would be a significant shift.
It would certainly invoke a hell of a lot of digestion problems in the workers' comp systems of the state governments.
I'm sure it would. I'm sure it would. Now, when and I'm just going to clarify for our audience, when you talk about diseased workers and the diseases, we're really talking about chemical exposure, inhalation, particle dust, asbestos, those type of diseases.
And psychology, mental health, like post-traumatic stress disorder, would be considered a disease as well.
Which has been a tremendous issue with the World Trade Center. Situation. Okay, very interesting.
Now, once again, we don't know really how many people are affected. It looks like if you draw upon what people have estimated so far, it's around 10,000 workers. But that could be considerably less than that, or it could be more than that.
Right. Numbers will have to shake out over time, and we may never know.
Well, maybe 30. We will never know. We will never know.
Interesting. And that's probably one of the things that need to change if something like that happens again.
Yeah, and I don't know. I really, Bob, I have no idea how we're going to solve this problem. It's easy for me to say the Fed should take it over, but it's a recommendation I'm by no means happy with.
We did a Comp Talk radio interview with you recently, and it was a very interesting one because after we stopped recording, you ended up grilling me on many issues, and it's the first time I've actually been interviewed during one of my interviews. You're a very naturally inquisitive guy, and that's why you're so good at what you do, particularly in your columns in Risk and Insurance magazine. We had to pause for a moment because we lost a light here in the studio, so if we look a little paler, it's just that we're not older. It's just we lost a light.
Well, I'm getting older with this interview. It's really grilling.
That's true. It's tough, but hopefully the audience isn't getting older with it too. No, it's been, I think, very interesting so far. What was I asking you? It was you had made the comment that the workers' comp industry can be proud of what it does day in, day out. I mean, a lot of people don't realize there are almost 16,000 injuries or occupational illnesses reported every day in this country. And by and large, most of them get treated, they get back to work, and they move on with their lives. But under the weight of this type of catastrophic situation, the system just collapsed, is what you'd, and it's really what you're saying to us today.
That's right.
I think it's interesting. Do you have anything you want to add as we wrap up? Is there anything you want to add to the tale of the trade centers and what we can do to prepare?
I think we need to find some way of building a dialogue, probably state by state, of the future of the workers' comp system. We need a greater dose of vision than we have done so far. Okay. And that, I recommend, involves the business community and the labor community, with the government keeping the fire burning underneath both of them. Okay. And I think that if we did that, without lurching through one crisis of reform to another crisis of reform, if we had more vision, I think that would be helpful. And that will, I think, address the kinds of issues we're talking about today.
Okay, well, super. Well, you know, for those who haven't read it, you have Peter has a 4-part series that appeared in Risk and Insurance Magazine.
That's right.
September, October of this year.
That's right.
Excellent articles, excellent series.
They can find it on they can find it on the net at riskandinsurance.com.
Risk and Insurance, that's what I was going to ask. I assumed it was still online at riskandinsurance.com. I would definitely recommend you go to check that out. It's an excellent series, well researched, and we really appreciate you taking the time to sit with us today and talk to us about it.
Well, I tell you, it's a real privilege. It's a real privilege. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been Comp Talk, and we have been recording here at the 16th Annual National Workers' Compensation and Disability Conference and Expo in Chicago, Illinois. We appreciate you joining us today, and until next time, thank you, and keep your workplace safe.